Hello, Virgo. Listen, not with your ears, with that deeper thing underneath your ears, the part of you that has always known before your mind catches up, the part that reads a room before you've said a word, the part that has been quietly, persistently um, trying to get your attention because there is something moving in your direction right now. Not abstract, not metaphorical, something real, something that exists in the mouth of another person, words that have been sitting there, formed and ready, waiting for the right moment to finally leave. And that moment is closer than you think. Stay here, because what I'm about to describe, you've been waiting to hear for longer than feels comfortable to admit. Drop a comment if you already feel your chest tightening, because I want to start with something specific. There is a particular kind of silence that exists between two people when one of them is holding something unsaid. You know this silence. You've been living inside it, maybe for weeks, maybe for months, that a specific quality of a conversation that keeps almost going somewhere real and then pulling back at the last second, like someone standing at the edge of a diving board, looking down, deciding, not yet, not yet, not yet. And you've been standing in the water below, looking up, wondering when or if, or whether you've been misreading the whole thing. Have you been living in that specific in between? Tell me in the comments, because here is what I want to name about that silence. It is not emptiness. Silence between two people who have something real between them is never empty. It is the most full silence that exists. It is loaded with everything that hasn't found its shape in words yet, with feeling that is too large for casual conversation, with truth that requires more courage than ordinary moments provide, and the probability that the silence you've been living inside is that kind of silence, full, loaded, waiting for the right crack of light to pour through, is something I want you to sit with honestly. Because not all silences mean nothing is there. Sometimes silence means what is there is too significant to be spoken carelessly. Can you feel that distinction in the specific silence you've been navigating? Drop a comment if that reframe shifts something. Now, I want to talk about what this person is carrying, because the title says someone will tell you something, and I want to get precise about the texture of what that something probably is. This is not small talk dressed up as significance. This is not a casual observation that got elevated into something it isn't. What is sitting in this person's chest has weight, real weight. The kind that makes ordinary conversation feel insufficient. The kind that keeps finding the wrong moment because no moment feels big enough to hold it. They've started the sentence in their head 100 times, maybe more. Tried different words, different approaches, different versions of how to say a true thing without it coming out wrong, without it being misunderstood, without it changing everything, before they're sure they're ready for everything to change. And underneath all of that preparation, underneath all the rehearsed versions and the almost moments and the pulled back edges there is something simple, something that doesn't actually need elaborate language, something that when it finally leaves their mouth is probably going to be far more direct than you expected. Can you feel the probability of that building? Tell me in the comments, because I want to address something now that I think is sitting underneath your attention to this reading. The fear, not the excitement, the fear that lives right next to the excitement, the fear that says, what if I've been misreading this? What if what I think I've been sensing isn't what's actually there? What if the moment finally comes and what they say is something entirely different from what I've been hoping it would be? I hear that fear. I'm not going to dismiss it. It's intelligent. It's the product of having hoped before and had the hoping land somewhere painful. But I want to offer you something alongside it. The probability that your perception has been fundamentally wrong is lower than that fear wants you to believe. Because perception of this quality, the kind that persists, the kind that doesn't dissolve when you try to logic it away, the kind that keeps reasserting itself no matter how many times you tell yourself you're imagining things. That kind of perception is usually tracking something real. Your instincts are not your enemy here. They are probably the most reliable narrator in this situation. And what they've been telling you, .d, serves more credit than the fear has been giving them. Have you been dismissing your own perception in this situation? Drop a comment if you've been in that specific internal argument. Now I want to talk about the news itself. What is the thing that is probably coming toward you? And I want to be careful here, precise without overreaching, honest without manufacturing certainty. I don't have the right to claim. What I'm reading in the energy around this situation is an admission. Not necessarily a dramatic one, not necessarily delivered in a grand cinematic way, but an admission of something that has been true for longer than it has been spoken. Something about how this person experiences you, something about what being around you or not being around you actually does to them. Something about a realization they've arrived at through the slow, unglamorous process of sitting with their own feelings long enough to finally understand what they actually are. And that realization, when it comes out of their mouth, is going to land in you somewhere specific. Not your mind first, your body first. That place in your chest that registers truth before your brain has processed the words, that place is going to know immediately. Can you already feel a version of that landing? Even just the anticipation of it. Tell me in the comments, because I want to talk about something that usually gets skipped in this kind of content, what you do with it when it arrives. Because receiving significant words from another person is its own skill, one that most people haven't been taught. Our instinct when something important is said to us is to immediately respond, to fill the space, to match the vulnerability with our own, or to deflect it with humor, or to minimize it because receiving it fully feels overwhelming, or to immediately start analyzing whether we believe it, whether it's true, whether it changes anything, but there is another way to receive something significant. And it requires a kind of stillness that doesn't come naturally to most people. It requires letting the words actually land before you decide what to do with them, letting them move through you before you respond to them, staying present in the moment of receiving rather than immediately jumping to the moment of reacting. And the probability that practicing that kind of stillness changes the quality of what happens next in this situation is higher than you might expect. How you receive what is coming towards you matters as much as what is actually said. Can you prepare yourself for that kind of presence? Drop a comment if you're thinking about how you want to show up when this moment arrives. Now, let me address something I haven't touched yet, the urgency in the title. That word, urgent, because I don't use that word casually. And I don't think it ended up in this reading without reason. There is a quality in the energy around this situation of something that cannot be held much longer, not in a threatening way, in the way that truth, when it has been contained past a certain point, it starts to find its own exits, starts to leak through in behavior, even when the words are still being withheld, in the way someone looks at you a half second too long, in the way they remember something small you said weeks ago, in the way they respond to your name when someone else says it in conversation. Truth that is ready to be spoken announces itself in 1,000 small ways before the actual words arrive, and the probability that you have already been receiving those announcements without fully allowing yourself to name what they're saying is something I want you to consider. Have you been noticing things, small things, things you've been filing under probably nothing? Tell me in the comments, because probably nothing is sometimes everything. Because I want to spend a moment here in this specific place, the place where you are right now, somewhere between knowing and not knowing, between sensing and confirming, between the almost and the actual. That in-between place is uncomfortable. It asks a lot of a person. It asks you to stay present in uncertainty without collapsing into either forced certainty or protective resignation. It asks you to keep your heart open without requiring it to be resolved before you can breathe. It asks you to trust your perception without demanding immediate proof that your perception is accurate. And that is genuinely difficult. It takes a specific kind of emotional maturity that doesn't get celebrated enough. The maturity of someone who can sit in the not yet without making it mean something terrible about what is or isn't coming. You have been doing that quietly, sometimes imperfectly, but genuinely, and that deserves to be acknowledged. Drop a comment if you've been carrying this uncertainty with more grace than you've given yourself credit for. Let me bring this toward its landing now, because I want to leave you somewhere real, somewhere that doesn't float. Here is what is true in the energy I'm reading around you right now. Something is in motion. Words that have been forming in someone else's interior are approaching the surface. A conversation that has been building in the spaces between your ordinary interactions is getting closer to the moment where it becomes unavoidable. And when it arrives, Dot, it is going to ask something of you, not action necessarily, presence, the willingness to be fully in the moment when the moment finally comes, to not be so defended that the words can't actually reach you, to not be so desperate for them that you can't receive them clearly, to be exactly where you are, open, grounded, real, the version of you that doesn't perform a response but actually has one. That version is the one this moment is coming to meet. And the probability that you are capable of showing up as that version is not in question. You have always been capable of that. The only question is whether you'll let yourself be breathe. Whatever is coming toward you, you are ready for it. Not because it will be easy, but because you have been in the uncomfortable in between long enough to have earned the clarity that comes when the silence finally breaks. And when it breaks, to stay there in the fullness of the moment. Let it be as big as it actually is. Let it land all the way, and then respond from the truest, most grounded, most genuinely you place you have access to. That is enough. That has always been enough. And what comes from that place is always, always real. I don't sell futures. I build architects. No predictions, just the raw truth for the tough ones. Stay magic. Stay in the now.